Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. This is the Pocket Midwife channel, and my name is Deirdre, and I have a special guest with me today. Her name is Becky, and she is a colleague and a friend of mine. So welcome, Becky. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So today we're going to have a bit of a chat about RH blood groups and anti-D. So Becky, in 2019, you wrote an article or a paper on this subject. What made you decide to research this topic?
It's been a very personal journey for me, Deirdre, and it's a topic I'm very passionate about. I'm a negative blood group myself.
Right.
I've been a midwife now for over 10 years. I've worked in different places around the world: New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, India, and in birth centres, home births and hospitals here in Australia. And as a student midwife, knowing I was a negative blood group, and knowing that in some countries they did the prophylactic anti-D during pregnancy, I always just thought, you know what, I'll marry a man with the same blood group as me, so
How did
I
that
don't
go
have
for
to
you?
worry about it. That element didn't go too well.
Right.
I married a positive man, and he is positive in every way, but his blood group is also positive. And so, you know, my plan of just marrying a negative man and not having to worry about the anti-D in pregnancy went
out the window.
Yes, it went out the window. And so my next thought was, I'll just decline the anti-D in pregnancy, because, you know, I've worked in New Zealand where it wasn't routinely done, but then it came out that some very dear, loved women in my family in previous generations had actually lost babies due to rhesus disease, and so it became a very personal thing for me that I didn't want to see this repeated in any future generations.
So for those people who don't know, because obviously we've got not just midwives watching, we've got mums watching who don't even know they're RH negative yet, or maybe about to find out that they are.
Yeah.
Tell me what it means to be negative blood group, and how common is this?
Being a negative blood group, I think, is quite special. There's a few folklores around it. It's thought that it's the blood group of royalty. One of the ideas out there is that the reason you're blue-blooded is because the copper that they used to eat off didn't stuck better to negative blood.
Is that right?
So hence the term blue-blooded. I don't know how true all of that is. So what does it mean? To put it, to kind of put it visually, it's about the proteins on the surface of your red blood cell. So if this is your red blood cell, well, this is what my red blood cell looks like. I'm an O negative, which means I have no A or B proteins on the surface of my red blood cell, and I have no positive or RH proteins on the surface of my red blood cell. And because I'm O negative, that means that I can donate blood to any person.
To anyone. You're a universal donor.
I'm a universal donor. So we are life givers. Negative women and negative people are life givers. And also, it's about 17% of the population. So of the...
That's pretty special.
It is quite special, and that's of the Caucasian white population. So negative blood groups are actually even less common in Asian and other ethnicities. So negative blood groups are most common in Caucasian and a lot rarer in other ethnicities. So this is there is nothing on the surface of my red blood cell. If you are to keep it simple, if you are a positive blood group, you have these little RH or positive proteins on the surface of your red blood cell. So that's how someone with a positive blood group would look.
Right. So why is this important to know in pregnancy?
Yeah, it's important, Deirdre, because in relatively rare cases, what can happen is if you are a negative blood group, so this only applies to women who are negative,
right,
and you are carrying a positive baby, In rare cases, during pregnancy, about 1% of the time, the baby's positive blood can cross into the mother's bloodstream. And the mother's immune system says, what are these extra positive proteins on the surface of my red blood cell? And she can mount an immune system to positive blood. And it probably won't affect her so much in that pregnancy, but in subsequent pregnancies, her antibodies will actually cross the placenta and destroy the red blood cells of any positive babies that she has in the future. So it happens about 1% of the time just randomly in pregnancy. If you have a hit to the belly, or you have an accident, or you have a bleed during pregnancy, there's an increased risk of this
Mixing
crossover occurring.
Right.
And during the birth, there's actually about a 16% chance of this happening, where the baby's positive blood gets into the mum's negative bloodstream. And there's some wonderful writers, Sarah Wickham, for example, who's a midwifery, senior midwifery lecturer and author. She talks about how perhaps in pregnancy this crossover of the baby's positive blood into the mum's negative bloodstream could be reduced even if we did delayed cord clamping, because the cutting and the clamping of the cord theoretically could make the baby's positive blood back up.
Because it backs up the blood.
And go into the mum's bloodstream.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's theoretical.
So one of the many reasons we should delay cord clamping.
That's right, one of the many reasons.
So, so this is really important. So let's, just to be clear, just to be clear for mums who don't really know, if you are a negative mum, you have a negative blood group, and you are carrying a positive baby the first time around, it's your first pregnancy, the chances of having a problem with this are very small.
Very small, particularly during the pregnancy, very small, 1%.
Right. And then there's a 1% chance of this blood crossing over, usually caused by some sort of incident.
Yes, well, it would be 1% if you had no incident.
Right.
If you have an incident, it's an increased risk. Yeah.
And at birth, about 16% chance of the blood mingling between mother and baby.
That's right.
Okay, so we're on to we've had baby number 1 and we haven't had a problem.
Yeah.
What then happens for baby number 2? What's the risk?
Assuming that there has been a crossover of the blood.
Right.
So if there has been a crossover of the baby's blood into the mum's bloodstream that has occurred, then first baby, you probably won't know about it. Second baby, that baby will probably be born very jaundiced and may need intensive phototherapy treatment of jaundice and even a blood transfusion after birth.
Right.
The next baby after that will probably require an intrauterine blood transfusion because the mum's antibodies would be, basically the mum builds up more of an immune system the more positive babies she has. So if she were to have a negative baby next time, it wouldn't be a problem. But if she were carrying a positive baby, her immune system would get stronger each time, each positive baby that she had.
Right.
And once you have built an immune system to positive, an immunity and the antibodies to positive blood, there's
the risk for the baby, the future babies
that's
increases.
right. And you can't. There's wonderful treatments available, but it is highly medicalised and very dangerous for subsequent babies.
So that's pretty scary.
It is.
And yet we seem to go through pregnancy for negative mums these days, and it seems to be kind of commonplace, the treatments involved or the preventatives involved in this. So what, under these circumstances in regular daily life, going to a hospital and having a baby and going to antenatal clinic, what's the normal process?
So we actually very rarely see rhesus disease. So rhesus disease is the name for a woman who has built antibodies to a positive blood group. We very rarely see it. I think I've
thing.
seen it once in my 10 years.
Right.
It's a wonderful thing, and I have personally known a few people in previous generations who've had it. And that is because we do have a wonderful treatment available, and that is called Anti-D. Anti-D is a blood product. It is generously given by donors, sometimes women who have rhesus disease themselves and who have built up antibodies to positive blood. Sometimes men are injected with positive blood and build up an immunity.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they then harvest the antibodies from these donors and inject them into women, negative women. So the routine care in Australia is that at 28 weeks and 34 weeks you get a routine injection of Anti-D. It's a blood product and it's antibodies against positive blood.
Right.
The idea is that if any of the baby's blood, and it's thought that 0.1 of a mil would be enough to make a mum
Wow, so
build
that's a really tiny amount.
tiny amount. That would be enough to make a mum build antibodies to positive blood. The idea of the Anti-D is when we inject it, it stays in the woman's system for weeks, 6-8 weeks, possibly more, and it mops up if any of the baby's positive blood has crossed into her bloodstream. It destroys that baby's blood in her bloodstream before she can ever build her own immunity to it. If she were to build her own immunity, it would be a lot stronger than the Anti-D injection. It would be crossing the placenta a lot more than the Anti-D injection does. So it's a wonderful treatment, Anti-D, and so we give it to negative women at 28 and 34 weeks pregnant, and we also give it to once a woman has a baby. Once a negative woman has a baby, they test the baby's blood group, and if the baby is positive, they will also give Anti-D to that woman after she's had her baby.
So most women then are looking at least 3 doses
At
of
least 3.
Anti-D.
And if the woman has a bleed in her pregnancy, or she gets a hit to the belly, then she would also have subsequent, other
A subsequent
injections
dose
as well.
of it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So Anti-D sounds like a marvellous treatment if it's needed.
It's a wonderful treatment if it's needed, and I believe it has saved a lot of babies' lives. But the fact is, as with any medical treatment, it's not without its risks.
Right, because it's a blood product.
It's a blood product.
So what are those risks?
So there hasn't been a lot of research around it, around, for example, the risks to the baby. There's actually been no research
Really?
on the risks to the baby.
That's concerning.
It is concerning. And we also know, as with any blood product, it's rare, but there's a risk of anaphylaxis or severe allergic reaction for the woman. In the 1970s and early 80s in Ireland, a lot of women contracted hepatitis C because the Anti-D was contaminated with hepatitis C. And while we have more screening in place now to ensure that Anti-D isn't infected with any of the major hepatitis C, HIV, Hep B, Anti-D isn't screened for everything, Deirdre.
Right.
So there are
So there
still
are things.
potentially infectious particles in the Anti-D that we don't know about.
And
There's
that's an issue. I mean,
there's so much we don't know about that we can't even
Absolutely.
test for yet.
and for me, my concern would be, am I getting enough information about this to know that I'm taking that risk?
And the problem with, potentially one of the problems with Anti-D too, is that when you get a vial of Anti-D, it's not just one person's antibodies you're being injected with, it's pooled.
Oh
So
my
in that
goodness.
one vial, there's potentially
Wow.
hundreds of people's antibodies in there.
Wow, that's almost a bit scary.
Yeah, so it's not without its risks, and prominent midwifery writers like Ina May Gaskin and Sarah Wickham have also talked about potential theoretical fertility and immune issues in negative babies in the future whose mothers were
Because of-
injected with anti-D.
Right.
I mean, these are all theoretical. It's not researched.
Right.
And then, of course, there is the theoretical risk of some of that anti-D crossing the placenta and making a positive baby a little bit anemic, which is obviously better than the,
Than the result of rhesus disease.
That's right.
Right.
But, it's a medical procedure. And as with any medical procedure, as we know, Deirdre,
Yeah,
there are
risks.
pros and cons and risks to weigh up.
So this has actually expanded since I was attending women years ago, because back then we just gave anti-D to the woman post-birth.
Yeah.
And now we're giving it at least 3 times during.
That's right. So basically, it's all based on a systematic review, based on 2 small randomized control trials in that systematic review. And the systematic review itself, which we know systematic reviews are the research that are the highest available evidence, but it says itself, this is still poor quality, this research around giving it at 28 and 34 weeks. But it is thought, based off the small amount of research, that it takes the risk from having the anti-D at 28 and 34 weeks, takes the risk down from 1% to 0.2%
Right.
of having this rhesus disease.
So
We're talking small numbers.
they are small numbers, aren't
Yeah.
they? They're very small numbers. And does that outweigh the risks of the actual?
That is a
Anti-D.
decision for the woman to make personally. I think because of my family history, and I have seen the tragedy that not having anti-D can cause, if I were carrying a positive baby, I would personally choose to have the anti-D at
Right.
28 and 34 weeks.
Yep.
But I would prefer not to have anti-D at all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so how do women avoid this?
Now, when I was pregnant with my first child in 2018, I had been a midwife for 7-8 years by
Right.
that point, and I had read Sarah Wickham's wonderful book called Anti-D, where she questions a lot of these things and looks at this topic in detail. And I thought, I don't want anti-D. Like, I knew my husband was a positive blood group, but because he had negative blood groups in his family, I knew that he carried the gene for negative blood groups. So statistically speaking, 50% of our babies would be a negative blood group. And in the wider population, in any given woman who's a negative blood group and pregnant, there's a 40% chance that the baby she's carrying will be negative as well, same as her.
So just to interrupt there, so that means that we are 60% of the time giving anti-D to women who don't actually.
40% of the time.
Oh, sorry,
we're-
yes, 40.
we're
So
giving-
60% it's
Potentially
potentially
need it.
okay. 40% don't need anti-D.
Because if you were carrying a negative baby and you were a negative woman, there is no risk of rhesus disease occurring. I mean, the baby's the same blood group as you.
So that is a really large number.
Very large. And the other issue, Deirdre, of course, is that women often aren't told is if the father of your baby is also a negative blood group, it is 100% certain that your baby will be negative. So if you and the father of your baby are negative, your baby will be negative and you do not need anti-D. So
do we ask that question in an antenatal clinic? Do we
there's
ask?
too much fear around infidelity. So
Right.
there's the women, unfortunately, are not told. The partners, husbands, they're not asked what is your blood group out of fear
Right.
that potentially that is not the father
they're
of the
not the
baby.
father.
So with my clients, I have very frank conversations, usually in private with the woman. If the father of this baby is absolutely the father of the baby, the first step, of course, and the easy step would be to get his blood
His
group
blood
tested.
tested, right.
He can go to his GP. If he is any kind of negative, then you don't need anti-D.
Don't need it at all.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but if, like me, the father of your babies is a positive blood group, then there's a 40 to 50% chance that your baby is also negative. And up until recently, there wasn't a way of finding that out. But when I was pregnant myself, I thought surely there's more information on this. And I read a wonderful article that Sarah Wickham had recently published. And there is a blood test that the mum can have done. It's called RHD genotyping, fetal RHD genotyping. And this blood test is done routinely on negative women in places like Finland and the Netherlands and in parts of England. So if she's a negative woman, she has this fetal RHD genotyping done on her, and it just involves taking a bit of blood from the mum, because even though normally speaking the placenta is amazing, on the whole the baby's blood, the placenta is designed so that the baby's blood doesn't go into the mum's bloodstream,
right.
But the baby's DNA does.
Right.
So that's why I'm sure some women would have heard of the NIPT test, which is like genetic testing on babies. This is the same idea, except we're not testing
the baby.
We're just testing what the baby's blood group is.
Right.
We're not testing the baby's
genetic makeup.
whether the baby has Down syndrome or anything like that, which they do test with the NIPT now. We're just testing the baby's blood group.
Right.
So it is a wonderful test, and in some countries it is routinely available.
But it sounds like not many countries.
Not many countries, just the advanced ones. Just the advanced ones. No, so, in Finland and the Netherlands and some parts of England, women who are negative, who are pregnant, are given the fetal RHD genotyping test, and then if their baby is also negative, they don't get given anti-D in pregnancy.
Well, this is an amazing thing to discover.
Wonderful.
I mean, so what did you do? What was your next step?
I wanted the test when I found out about it.
I bet.
I wanted the test, and I thought, can I send my blood overseas to one of these places? And I started Googling, and I found out that there are some wonderful progressive researchers here in Australia, affiliated with the Australian Red Cross, who are trying to bring this test into Australia as a routine thing.
How amazing would that be?
It would be amazing. It would be such a good thing for women and for babies.
Wow, and it's just to prevent women having to be injected with a blood product. That's
Unnecessarily.
amazing in itself.
Exactly. So I emailed these researchers, and they very kindly got in contact with me and said that in some of the tertiary hospitals, this blood test is actually available. And the reason being is that women who already have rhesus disease, this blood test is used. So say a woman has developed rhesus disease in a previous pregnancy and she is now pregnant again. She wants to find out, and the doctor wants to find out, is this baby positive or negative? Because it's a negative baby, we can all sit back and relax.
Right.
If it's a positive baby, we need to start intensive treatment for this woman.
Right.
So it is actually available in Australia, believe it or not. And after being a midwife for nearly 8 years, I had never heard of it, and neither had any of my colleagues. It's often only used in Australia by fetal maternal medicine specialists who are dealing with very high-risk women. But it is available through the Australian Red Cross in Australia.
So that's pretty exciting information. I want to say, how do we find that out? So can women go to their GP? Are their GPs likely to know what this is about?
Their GPs are unlikely to have even heard of this test, Deirdre.
Okay.
But women need to start asking for it, because it is available in Australia.
Absolutely.
And certainly, obstetricians should know about it, because it would be the very senior obstetricians who would be ordering this test, normally speaking. So if a woman asks for a consult with an obstetrician, but certainly you can be asked, technically your GP should be able to order it if they knew about the test, and if your GP was happy to do a little bit of research into the test. But there needs to be demand for this test. In fact, Deirdre, these same researchers who want to bring this wonderful test as part of routine care into Australia have done a cost-benefit analysis and found that if this test were done on all pregnant negative women and those who are carrying a negative baby, because this test, Deirdre, is incredibly accurate. It's 99.9% accurate.
Good, I was just going to ask you that. So.
More accurate, well, just as accurate as any other test.
Right.
If you want to find out what your blood group is, it's just as accurate finding out your blood group as it is finding out your baby's blood group. So it's a very accurate
So the question
test.
is, why aren't we doing it?
I hope other women can access this and prevent this. I mean, who wants a needle anyway if they don't need it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And if you are watching this and you are a mum or a midwife or a mum-to-be, and you would like more information about this, or you would like to maybe write to us and say that you're interested in pushing this agenda and getting behind this move to bring in this type of testing in Australia more, and even if you're watching from somewhere else around the world, this is something you too can go and see your general practitioner about and request these tests and see if you can't get things moving to change things so that we stop injecting as many women as we are with this anti-D. You can do that by sending me an email at admin@thepocketmidwife.com. If you're in Australia, you can add an AU on the end. Both will reach us. Also, if you want to go to our website at thepocketmidwife.com, there's also some more options there for you to find out what choices are available to you on other topics as well. There's a free video clip that you can download there about choices. So please do. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you.